Hello everyone, welcome to Painting Crafty. And did you know it was National Pie Day? Not the type you eat, but numbers and circles. Yep, today is the National Day of Pie, and I'm a part of the YouTube collaboration with the Take 5 group today, and we are celebrating the Pie Day. Pie Day. Who doesn't want to celebrate Pie Day, right? I didn't even know there was such a thing. But I'm going to be creating a number-inspired piece of art, a mixed media piece, which I was inspired by our American artist, Jasper Johns, and he created number pieces with some circles in it as well. I'm going to show you how I drew it and give you some tips of how I put it together. And then I'm going to show you the watercolor technique that I use, as well as a pencil shading process to add some depth to that. And I'm going to put it all together in a pie piece. Pie, like the numbers. Well, let's get started. I can't wait to show you what I created. So who exactly was this American artist, Jasper Johns, that inspired this piece? He is best known for his abstract expression and pop art. You can kind of tell it looks like pop art. And he often used flags and targets and numbers, and he was well known for layering of his materials and of images. He tested the boundaries of what was considered art at the time. It was the 1950s, and so he was kind of a part of that abstract pop movement. After looking at some of his art, I thought it would be a perfect style to create this National Day of Pie piece. So I used the mathematical equation symbol of that pie symbol, and then I used the numbers 3.14 because that's a part of the equation. So I use those numbers, and when you're placing them, you want to layer them on top of each other. Now I'm going to include this drawing inside of my Ko-fi membership. Over there you can just go to my shop and you can grab the free tracer for this. So go, and I'll have the link down inside of the description box so you can easily find the link to this if you decide you would like to make one. Now today I am using this watercolor set. I'm choosing it because it has lots of different colors in it. That also has some of the fluorescent colors in there. It's made by Garby. It's very reasonably priced watercolor, so I'm just going to be using that. And I like using the variety of colors in this set. I was going to be setting it up so that I was going to be using some of the cool colors in certain elements and then layering in my warm colors. That's how I was going to be getting the difference, is choosing some of the elements to be cool colors and then choosing some of the other ones to be warm and mixing it in between. Like I said, that tracer will be inside of my Ko-fi shop. You can go over there and grab it if you would like it. And the link will be in the description box. So the first step, after you've got it all traced, go ahead and take a micron pen. You want to use a micron pen because it's a permanent ink and you'll be able to put the watercolor over top of it easily. I am using watercolor. You could also do this in acrylic paint if you wanted to. Now you want to go ahead and find some of those really small little crossover pieces and do a few little hatch marks inside of those pieces. Those areas will be left white and you'll just see the little cross hatches of the black inside. I kind of think of doing shapes or balancing it out. So if I have kind of a triangle shape or movement around my piece is what I'm going to be looking for. So if you don't have enough of these shapes, go ahead and fill in a little larger space just so you feel like your picture has a balance before you start the watercolor step. Oh yes, you definitely want to erase your pencil lines after putting in your micron pen over the top because the pencil lines will be trapped underneath if you don't erase them. So go ahead, put your line work on with your micro pen, erase your pencil marks, put your cross hatches in, and then we're going to go ahead and start with the watercolor step. Now this part, I'm going to speed it up a little bit and I'll talk a little bit through it, but it is kind of fun to see the process all come together and the layering of the colors. Each little individual spot is going to be a separate color, but it looks so cool in the end. Well, let's get moving this fast forward so you can see how I start the process. To start with, I started with the pie symbol, the mathematical symbol first, and I wanted to keep that in my shades of blue and green. I was going to be adding blue and green in this area and then smattering around the other shades of the warmer colors on the 3, and then I put the purples on my 4, and I did the circles. The majority of those were in purples as well, but I did dash a little bit of those neon colors throughout the process. And then I'm going to be creating a fun little watercolor blending technique for my background, but this is where I'm going to be starting, and I'm going to be layering in my blues and greens on this particular one. After completing a few of these pieces, I have noticed that it really does help if you keep your colors of one element being cool, another element being warm, and you can also do one element in, say, all the same color family, so that purple being on the 4, but then adding a few little pops of surprises of color really does bring these pieces together. It's still going to be very much an abstract form of art, and that's created by layering your pieces, your numbers over top of each other, but adding those color formations underneath is going to bring your piece together, and it creates a super fun piece. So grab that tracer inside of my Ko-fi shop, give it a whirl. I think you're going to have fun doing it. If I didn't say it earlier, I am using watercolor paper. I'm using Canson brand 140-pound watercolor paper. It's a student grade. It dries fairly quickly because it doesn't have a lot of cotton in it, but the same rules apply. You do want to give your paint areas time to dry in between, so I didn't want to put my red right up next to my blue right away. I wanted to give that a little bit of time to dry because watercolor always wants to flow wherever that paper is wet. So if I move too quickly across this piece, my colors are going to flow into each other. So I still want a separation of colors. Now on this 4, I could have hurried it a little bit faster because all my colors were shades of purple. But you can still give a little bit of time in between dry time. So then that keeps your colors separated. I'm going to be adding some shading with a very soft pencil in the end to create another depth to this piece. The same rule applies as well as far as watercolor will dry lighter as it dries. So when you lay your colors down, if you're using a color that doesn't have as much pigment in it, you may have to add another layer. But that's okay. It's going to look great even if you have to add a couple of layers onto your color. So it just kind of depends on how much pigment is in that color when you lay it down. If you happen to go out of your areas and you go past the little area you wanted to paint, and say it's in the white area, you can go ahead and wash your brush out, take some clean water into your brush, tap it on a paper towel first though, and then kind of tickle that surface a little bit, and you can lift some of the colors. Now every color lifts differently than other ones, so like if it has more staining property, you're not going to be able to lift it as well as some other colors, but there's a chance you'll be able to kind of just tickle that paper a little bit and pick up the color. Once I had the elements and the numbers and the circles all painted, I let it dry really well, and I was going to begin the shading process. I was going to be using a Kimberly 9XXB pencil and a paper blending tool. The paper blending tool, you purchase those at the area where you buy your pencils and your erasers. It's got that nice little pointy little paper tip, and it works great for this technique. I was going to be adding just a little bit of pencil in the corners, not necessarily on every piece, but I do end up adding it on quite a few of the areas actually. But you take a little bit of that pencil, put it into your corners, and then you take that paper blending tool and you're going to make kind of little circles or spread it out towards the area of the center. And you can also take your little blending tool and go around the inside of your little areas. You're going to have enough of that pencil graphite on the end of the paper tool to make and create a really pretty shadow. It does add a little bit more pencil than what you might think it's going to add, so go slow, start slow, and then add on as you're going through your piece if you think you need to add more dark to your area. Especially on some of the smaller areas, you need to be a little bit more careful about it because otherwise your area can end up all of the graphite color and none of your color left. Ask me how I know. I did that a little bit in some of my smaller areas. So a tip would be to go slow on some of those smaller areas. A matter of fact, you might just want to do maybe one edge in the small areas and not do all of the edges. In your bigger areas, I did more than just one edge. I would go around into all of the edges and add that extra depth. I'm going to speed this up a little bit so you can watch this come together, but this is another fun step for this piece. A tip for when you're using graphite pencils, you might want to consider putting a piece of tissue, like a Kleenex tissue, underneath your hand if you need to be able to put your hand down on the surface and you've already done a certain area. By having the tissue there, that's just going to help so that you don't smear your graphite across your piece. Now I did this in graphite, but you could also use colored pencils in this step. You could even use watercolor pencils in this step if you wanted to add a little bit of shading that way. Watercolor pencils would be a perfect tool to use for this step as well. Now that I have all of that shading done, I'm going to go ahead and put my background on. First, I'm going to be putting on just plain clear water. I wanted to create a blending technique of going from one color to another, gradually changing colors as I went up my page. So I'm going to be adding the clear water on first so I have a nice blendable surface, and my water colors will just blend naturally as I'm putting them on. I'm staying away from my finished areas. I'm still trying to keep just a little bit of a dry edge around it, not trying to get too much water into those places because remember, watercolor wants to float wherever it's wet. First, I'm starting out with a light shade of blue at my bottom. I'm going up maybe about halfway, and then I'm coming in with that bright color of green. I'm starting up a little bit higher and then blending that down into my green. So I'm going to be coming up and then blending down. And then once I have that green laid in, I went ahead and I switched up my greens to be more of a blue-green on one side, adding that bright blue green at the very top. And then I switched to more of a yellow-green at the very far corner. It's still in the green family, but I'm going to warm it up slightly on my far side. I'm going to come around and then bring that color down into the one I have on my paper. And then as this dries, because my paper is fairly wet on the back, it's going to just naturally make its own blended looks. I do come back in and add a little bit darker blue at that bottom. It was a little too light for me, so I kind of came in and added more of a sky blue at the very bottom, and I liked the way it looked in the end. Now for the final reveal. I'm going to remove my washi tape. Now you can heat this washi tape up just a tiny bit with like a hair dryer or a heat tool to make that glue a little bit less able to pull up your paper. But I do like using washi tape. For the most part, it does stick down really well and it doesn't tear up your paper too much. But use a little bit of heat if you want to take a little step of making sure that your paper is not going to rip up. Now I'm going to show you, I did have just the tiniest bit of bleed over on my edge right there. So what I'm going to do is take my small brush, take some clean water, and do that tickling trick again. So I'm going to take my water on my brush and then just go in a little bit tickling on the surface. I say tickle because you don't want to rub too hard because that will rough up your paper and damage it if you do it that way. So just kind of do a light texture back and forth. And then once I have it mostly removed, I take a paper towel and dab it and pick up the rest. And that worked really well. I wanted to say a special thank you to Mary, Jeanie, and Kristi for hosting today's fun collaboration. You're going to find the links to their channels inside of the description box, as well as the playlist. Check it out and see what everyone else contributes to today's pie celebration. If you're new to my channel and you like doing arts and crafts, come on over and see what I'm doing. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. If you enjoyed watching this one be put together, here's a couple more videos you might want to check out. Leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up. I'd love to know if you enjoyed watching today's tutorial. Well, thanks for hanging out with me today, and hopefully you'll come back and join me again. And next time, you'll create right along with me.